Hello everybody, welcome back to our Unreal Engine classroom series that we have been working on. So last time, or in the first video, I was showing you how to set up a parent class that you can use to have a parent-children relationship where the children are just going to inherit data based on the relationship with the parent. And we already have a structure in place and everything is set up kind of dynamically. And yeah, we have a couple of things that we can play with in the world, like a banana, an apple, blah blah blah. And oh, I was not able to be. Okay, there we go. So right now we don't really have anything out of the ordinary. I was definitely interested in setting up some kind of an inventory system, but I want to talk a little bit about casting and this function right here. Now, casting, I have found that is one of the most interesting topics for many people. Reason being is because if you actually go out there in the internet, what you're going to come across is an overwhelming amount of people telling you like, no, you shouldn't be doing casting, try to avoid casting, casting is bad, blah blah blah. And well, simply put, there's nothing wrong with casting. It's just a matter of understanding what you're doing, why you're doing it, and when you should be doing it. So what is a cast? A cast is basically a way that you will use to access an object or a class or a blueprint, and it's going to allow you to access variables, functions. So there's going to be times where you're going to be doing something and you need to do a cast for a certain operation. Nothing wrong with it. Now, if you're this casting is definitely a very demanding operation. Reason being is, many people don't explain this for some reason. Say that you need to cast like we're doing right now. I'm telling the engine, hey, I have all the intention in the world of accessing this blueprint and its variables and all the information. So the engine is going to have to force the computer to reserve memory for this because it's a sort of a deliberate operation where I just want to access the entire thing. So it's in this case when we are overlapping the item, the other actor, this is what it's called, a general object. We don't know what it is. Yeah, like we as the programmer right now, if we're looking at this, we take this, we don't know what that is. Like, right, we know that we want the player to be able to interact with this. So this is the reason why we're doing this casting, because we know that our general actor, we know what we want to check on it, which is the player. Assuming this general actor is another blueprint in the world or object in the world, then we don't care. We only care about the player. So when you're casting, in this particular sense, because most likely at some point you're going to have a casting that is going to have some kind of a function within it that you're going to be calling it from here, right? In our case, that is not the case. It's just a check. I'm just checking if this general actor is actually the third person character, because then I want to be able to allow the input on this blueprint. If the cast fails, if you're going to be using a casting, you should try to make a habit of, handling the fail part. In our case, it's completely irrelevant. Reason being is because we don't really care about anything else. We only care about the player. If the cast fails, that means that what we're overlapping is not the player. It could fail for other reasons. It could be the player and it fails, and in that case, if you want to have something here to do some sort of a catching or the system to be able to handle this properly, you can do so. So in our case, or at least for the purposes of the video, I'm not going to care too much. So, but now we have to think about this logically and programmatically. Do we need a cast for this? The simple answer is no. Casting, more often than not, you need to use a cast, or you should be using casting, or you're going to be using casting when you try to access something in particular. So getting familiar with how and when, it's definitely going to help you a lot. So let's say that in our third person character there's something very specific that we need access. We need to actually go there and grab it, and or do some kind of a getter to do something else. Then you would do a casting. Can you accomplish this with interfaces? It could be. The answer is most likely yes, but it's going to require a lot of more setup that I just think it doesn't really have a payoff. It's going to be far more convoluted. So I just prefer to do a casting whenever I'm trying to access something. So what is an example of trying to access something? Well, most likely you have like a save game, like in the game instance, and you need to load any save data. You do a cast for this. It's better to just do a casting and get that information. But for this, we just need to check. This is just setting up some kind of a behavior, so we can do this in a more efficient way. So we're just going to get rid of this casting over here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into our main. I'm going to create a main player folder. We're going to be putting more stuff in here later on as we progress throughout these videos. So I'm going to create a new folder. I'm just going to call this interface, and I'm going to be creating a new interface. So I'm going to right click on our content browser. We're going to go into blueprints, blueprint, and we're going to select the blueprint interface, and we're going to call this BPI. And I'm just going to call this main player. You can call this whatever you want. If you want to call this Peppa Pig, that's fine. Okay, just use something that you like, makes sense to you, whatever you're working on. It doesn't matter. So our interface, you can have as many functions as you want down here, but I don't really need any functions right now, at least for what we're trying to accomplish. So we're going to go back into the third person character, which is what we're using currently as our template. We're going to click on class settings, and from here we're going to go where it says implemented interfaces. We're going to click on add, and we're going to search for main player, and that's it. Now our third person character has the interface assigned to it. So once we get to this point, we're going to go back to the parent blueprint, and now we're just going to grab our general actor, and instead of casting to something specifically, we're just going to say, okay, does this guy implement an interface? And the interface that we're going to be checking against is this one, the main player, the one that we just created and assigned to the third person character. So if this general actor implements the main player interface, if the condition is actually true, we would like to do something. So let's say you have like a very intricate function inside this guy right here. You could just call that interface right from here, but since that's not the case, what we're doing right now is actually simple. Once the condition has been true, just grab the player controller and enable input on this item, or item. So on event and overlap, we're basically going to do the same thing. We're going to put this right here, other actor, and if that guy is the main player or implements the main player, we're just going to do this. So right now, this is just going to work exactly the same way. I'm overlapping the banana, capturing the banana, or adding the banana to the invisible inventory that we have right now. As you can see, it's working. But it is really important that you also do this part. And remember that in the first video I did mention that I want to show you how certain things work and why they work in the way they work, and I just didn't want to make a video where I show you how to get from point A to point B. No, I actually want to show you things that are not working correctly, things that are failing, because you need that edge, you need that exposure to be able to debug and troubleshoot where something doesn't work properly. So having this part right here, it's definitely critical, and the reason being is if you don't have an overlap event, what do you think is going to happen if you look at this code? Well, if your answer was, if we overlap and we're the main player and we have enabled the input on the item, and then we end the overlap, but we don't have any functionality assigned to it, what's going to happen is you are still going to be able to destroy this actor regardless of your position, and that's super weird. And if you want to visualize this in real time, um, I'm going to overlap the apple, and then I'm just going to move away, and if I press E, the apple has been destroyed. And it's going to be the same thing for the banana, and it's going to be the exact same thing for the pear. And why do you think the behavior is exactly the same for both? Well, it's actually super simple. It's because they're all children from this blueprint. That means that the behavior is just going to be passed down as another trait. So it's super, super important that you also connect this over here. By doing so, now if I overlap the apple and I go somewhere else and I start pressing E, nothing is going to happen. That the input has been properly disabled. So, um, yeah, casting, as I mentioned, casting is basically a way of the programmer or you or anyone telling the system or telling on Unreal Engine that you have all the intention in the world of accessing something specifically. Casting, if you take a look at the videos that you're going to find on the internet, I would say like 99% of the people out there are going to criticize casting, are going to say that you shouldn't be doing casting, blah, blah, blah. But the reality is, the more you program and the more you design a video game, the more you're going to realize that at some point you're going to have to do castings because there's something very specific that you need, and maybe there's no other way of getting that information, or you just need that information like in real time, whatever. So you as the designer, you have to come to a point where you understand what is going on and you know the approach that you have to go with. In this particular case, or in this particular example that we're giving, since the only thing we're really interested in is knowing what the hell is overlapping this item, we can just get away with using that interface, and then we don't have to use the casting, meaning that we don't have to basically access the entire object. So for our third person character right now, we don't really have too much in terms of variables and functions. So really, if you do a casting, well, most likely it's not going to have like a huge impact on performance. But let's assume that you have, like, I don't know, 100 functions, you have maybe 1000 variables down here, you have many graphs and whatnot. Then what's going to happen is that that cast is going to be taxing on the system because of the amount of data and information that it needs to access. In the same fashion, as I mentioned, when you go through this right here, let's say that when you're overlapping for whatever reason, if the actor, in this case the main player, if the actor has something in it that you need to activate, or maybe like a widget that it's going to be displaying some kind of an interaction or whatnot, then you would call that interface from the other actor. And that means that inside this blueprint right here, you would need to have that set up. And you might be wondering, what the hell is he talking about? Well, it's actually simple. If we go to the main player interface and we add a function, and I call this test, right? Now we have a test function. And in here, I grab this. After I have checked that this guy actually implements the interface, meaning that we know for a fact this is the main player, I can say, you know what, let's just go ahead and call test. And then you call the function. Well, not function, interface, and the interface basically has a function assigned to it. So you can put this like so. So you call this test And right now this is not really doing anything because something needs to have this implemented. In this case, it should be the third person character. So if you go back to that blueprint and then you go to interfaces, you see that we now have the test interface showing. So what you need to do is you need to right click on it and it's going to give you the implement option. Now let's say that for whatever reason Unreal Engine is broken and it's not giving you this right here. You can just right click on the graph and then say test, and you will have the function right here. Sorry, that's not what I want. Test. Whoops. There we go. Add event. Add event test. This should be. You're always going to look for add event. So as you can see, Unreal Engine uses different syntaxes, I would say, for everything, right? Because right now, if I right click here, under my blueprint, you get an implement event. That's the naming convention. But if you're actually right clicking on the graph and you're looking for test, it's then called add event. It's not implement event. So, those are basically small details. I don't think they're gonna break or make anything, but it's always good to know. And once you have implemented your interface, you can right click and say we're gonna print a string, because this is just for debugging purposes, and this is going to print a hello. And now let's see, when we overlap the item, um, we can see the hello being displayed. Again, this doesn't really have any value, but if you want to test certain things properly, let's say that you want to test the name of what you're overlapping, you can grab the item data. And we already have getters in here, so I don't have to do it this way. I'm gonna get the item name. So this is one of the good things about getters. You already set that beforehand, and now you can just focus on whatever you need. So what we can do is we can go back here to the actual interface. We can click on the function, and here I can just add a new variable, and I can call this like item name maybe. Again, most likely this doesn't really have any value in terms of designing a game. Sorry about that, my disconnected. So most likely, this doesn't have any real values. It's more for testing purposes. We're gonna set this to a text, and now if we go into here and we plug that there, and then we go into third person character, now we can basically show what we are overlapping, right? So if we play the game, a banana, an apple, and again, this is data driven. We're using the data found on the item. Again, just to recap, yeah, this is the parent blueprint, but basically all of this is being inherited by the children. So we're just getting the data right here, and that is the information that we're passing on. So right now doesn't really have any value, because again, this is mostly for troubleshooting purposes or debugging purposes, or showing how we are or how things are set up. But let's say that maybe inside your third person character you have a widget. We're gonna go further into detail in a different video. I'm just gonna quickly go over it, but let's say that you have a widget, and you want that widget to display like the name of what you're overlapping. Like you want to have like a better looking text or border, then this would be the way that you're going to be passing on that information instead of just having to cast. But yeah, I really hope this video has been of any value. It's a very certainly very interesting topic, and when you're starting something up, especially in Unreal Engine, it can be daunting, it can be complicated, knowing for certainty when you should be doing a cast and when you should be using an interface. But again, more often than not, when you want to access, a keyword is going to be access. When you want to access something specifically, whether that's a variable or a function or a system, you're going to end up using a cast. And when you want to define or set up a behavior, such as what we're doing right here, then you can just get away with using an interface. Again, another example would be you're loading something, an item. You're loading, well, item maybe not so much, but let's say you're loading a statue or a blueprint that you're going to be interacting with, and maybe it is some kind of a puzzle. When you the then begin play for that actor, maybe you want to do a cast because you want to try to see if there's any information saved that pertains to the puzzle or the current behavior, and since you need to access that information, then you do a cast. But if you just want to send information over, then an interface is just going to get the job done. So with that, we're going to be concluding this video. I really hope this has been of any value to you. If you have any questions, you can just feel free to put them on the comment section, and I'll try my best to get back to you. If not, well, I'll be seeing you guys around in the next video.